Matthew 7:24-27. At the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus presents a final illustration to summarize everything he has been declaring. He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. The rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded upon the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. The rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." This conclusion begins with the word therefore, pointing back to everything Jesus has taught throughout the Sermon on the Mount. His teaching had not merely been ethical instruction. It was a declaration concerning the arrival of the kingdom of heaven and the approaching crisis that would come upon that generation. The sermon describes the character of those belonging to the kingdom and contrasts them with the religious system that was nearing its end. Jesus portrays two builders, two foundations, and two outcomes. The first builder is described as wise. He hears the words of Jesus and builds upon the rock. In the scriptures, the imagery of a rock often represents stability, covenant faithfulness, and the sure foundation provided by God Himself. The prophets had spoken of a coming cornerstone laid by God in Zion. Jesus presents himself and his words as that unshakable foundation upon which a secure house may be built. The house represents the life, identity, and standing of those who hear his message. To build upon the rock is to align oneself with the reality that Jesus is revealing, the arrival of the kingdom, and the fulfillment of God's promises. The second builder is described as foolish. He hears the same words, yet builds upon sand. Sand represents instability and impermanence. A structure built upon it appears secure for a time, but cannot endure when pressure arrives. In the context of Jesus' audience, this describes those who heard his proclamation but continued to rely upon the fading structures of the old covenant order. Both houses appear similar before the storm. Both builders hear the same words, yet their foundations differ. Then Jesus introduces the storm. Rain descends, floods rise, and winds strike the houses. This language echoes prophetic imagery used throughout the Hebrew scriptures to describe divine judgment coming upon nations and cities. The prophets frequently portrayed judgment as overwhelming water, destructive winds, and unstoppable storms. Jesus had already warned earlier in the sermon that judgment was approaching that generation. The storm therefore represents the coming upheaval that would soon overtake the land, the climactic end of the age in which the old covenant system would collapse. When the storm strikes, the house built on the rock stands. Its foundation holds firm because it rests upon the reality revealed in Christ and the kingdom he proclaimed. The structure endures because it is grounded in what God himself has established. The house built upon sand collapses. Its fall is described as great, emphasizing the magnitude of the collapse. What seemed stable and impressive could not withstand the approaching judgment. The fall reflects the end of the system that had been trusted for security, but lacked a true foundation. This illustration therefore serves as the closing warning of the sermon. Jesus is not merely offering moral advice. He is revealing the dividing line between two realities. One rests upon the enduring foundation established through him, while the other depends upon what was temporary and already passing away. In this way, the two houses symbolize two covenantal standings. One stands secure because it rests upon the completed work and authority of the Messiah. The other falls because it relies upon structures that could not endure the transition taking place in that generation. Thus, the teaching concludes the Sermon on the Mount with a vivid picture. When the storm arrived and the winds struck, the difference between the two foundations became unmistakably clear. One house remained standing, while the other experienced a great and final collapse.